From this small factory, Bob Cowan launched a campaign to win over the mighty US military machine with his recompression chambers. After 4 years, numerous trips to America and about $500,000 of his own money, Cowan Manufacturing's general manager is about to enjoy the fruits of a $14 million victory.
The contract is for initially 8 chambers with 32 as an option. Once we get the 8 finished, which will take us about 12 to 18 months, then we'll follow on with the rest of the 32.
The special stainless steel chambers will be used by the US Navy to treat divers suffering from decompression sickness known as the bends. The manufacturing of the tanks will be an all Newcastle affair.
I'm trying to keep it all in Newcastle. Last chamber we built, which is the one here for the South Australian Police, we used about 30 different firms in Newcastle, albeit in a small way for each part, but the complete manufacture was done here in Newcastle.
Mr. Cowan says he's disappointed that the federal and state governments have not helped him clinch the multi-million-dollar deal.
Unfortunately, the government don't see this as a major priority, which is a little disappointing.
It's good news for the TAB with a statewide increase of 6.1%.
In the Newcastle region, we're still feeding off the influx of people into the area as a result of a few of the traumas, i.e. the earthquake, and our sales in our agencies have been very, very good.
In Newcastle, greyhound racing saw a 25% jump in turnover, generating more than $11 million.
A lot of that has to do with the increase in meeting numbers that we've covered, but also I think it's a great reflection on the standard of meeting that they're producing, and also a great indication of the support which the meetings are receiving from not only Newcastle but from across the state.
Earnings from harness racing at Wyong rose dramatically by 43% due to a change to Monday racing. The figures proved that during tough economic times, people are still willing to part with their hard-earned dollars.
And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that we're in the entertainment industry, and I think the TAB provides a low-cost form of entertainment, and that's pretty important in today's climate. The more they have, the more they can spend, or if they don't have quite as much, they can spend less but still get the same form of enjoyment out of it.
Hunter spray painters say the recession has already taken the shine off their business, but the enforcement of a licensing requirement to have spray painting booths installed could mean many shops will have to shut their doors.
Well, I feel that 40% of about 260 shops will fold. Will definitely close.
A spray painting booth can cost anywhere from $15,000 to $80,000, and small shop owners say they simply don't have the money.
But the small shops like us, it'll be very, very hard. I'll have to get a loan of some money or something like that, and if I cannot get a loan and can't get the council approval, that puts me out of work plus 6 panel beaters out of work.
But some in the industry see the tightening up of licensing as a wise move. Jim Kelly from the vehicle painting section at Glendale TAFE College says the booths could help preserve the workers' health. He says breathing in some kinds of paint day after day in an unprotected environment will slowly poison you. Even the smaller operators concede that health is a valid argument for the spray painting booths.
Helps the spray painter not to breathe in the toxic fumes that's going around, and the residents aren't breathing in the toxic fumes, and so forth.
The chairman of the Motor Vehicle Repair Industry Council, Vince Nash, says the new requirements are being enforced for 2 reasons. The booth gives a better standard of spray painting, and secondly, it offers protection from toxic materials. Scott Bevan, NBN News.
With health accounting for about 30% of the state's total budget, funding across New South Wales will suffer. Dr Owen James of the Area Health Service estimates the Hunters' funding this year will drop by about $10 million. He says the restructuring and upgrading of facilities will be the first area to be cut when the knife falls.
It is clear to us now that we can't expect to have the increases in services that we planned for next year. In last year, just past, we had a 7% increase in services. It is highly likely that we'll have no increase in services this year.
The upgrading of Maitland and Muswellbrook hospitals will be put on the back burner, but according to Dr James, projects for which tenders have already been called, like the James Fletcher and Morisset hospitals, will go ahead. He also says that the service's policy of referring non-emergency cases to general practitioners will mean primary care wards will not be affected.
The hovercraft was under construction in this shed when it was loaded onto a truck and driven away in what appears to be a heated climax to a bitter dispute over contracts. The 10-metre craft was almost completed but still had to have a rubber skirt attached when it went missing. Delta Hover manager Barry Wilson says it was lined up for sale through a company in Ireland when it disappeared, endangering the future of the deal.
The craft is under contract on sale to an Irish company. They expect to get it in a few months' time, and we haven't got it.
So what happens then?
Well, our advice is that we can accept the money for it, but at this stage it may have to be placed in trust, and we'll have to resolve the issue either through police action or through the courts.
In the meantime, police are making inquiries which are believed to be in connection with a Queensland-based company.
All the police can do are to interview the people that have it, get their side of the story. If they can establish there's some criminality involved, that they'll take criminal action. If not, they'll hand it back to us and we'll have to take civil action.
It all started with an invitation from 10-year-old Cameron Quilty, who, along with the Hopetown students, is a Ninja Turtle fan. The police air wing flew in their colleagues in crime fighting, who were an instant success. Ably assisted by their cartoon counterpart April O'Neil, Donatello, Raphael, Michelangelo and Leonardo shook their shells to the crowd's delight. The Turtles have joined the drug offensive, and their songs push anti-drug, alcohol and smoking messages. The most devoted fans were easy to spot, and Turtle Mania seemed to catch on. Letter writer Cameron Quilty had a front row seat and didn't mind a little rain coming between himself and his heroes.
Over the past 5 years, the Area Assistance Scheme has pumped more than $20 million into the Hunter to help community groups set up locally based welfare projects. The Jesmond Neighbourhood Centre, the Newcastle Ethnic Communities Council and the Singleton Crisis Shelter Group are among the 50 organisations to benefit from those grants. Under Premier Greiner's across-the-board cuts, the scheme has been suspended. Concerned welfare workers claim the cutbacks will prevent new projects getting off the ground and cast a shadow over programs already underway.
Homeless kids, families in crisis, elderly people, children who've been sexually abused, all services to those sorts of groups will be cut and affected by this.
They say that at a time when unemployment figures are skyrocketing, it will force at least some of these workers onto the dole queue and at the same time deprive people in dire economic and emotional need of support that could help them. But ironically, this move that will cost local welfare services so much will make up only a small part of the government's budgetary savings.
For the Hunter area, I think we're looking at around about $5 million, so it's a very small amount of money in the overall terms of the budget deficit and the sort of cuts that are being made.
But how big an impact will it have?
It'll have an enormous impact. And communities that have been developing because of the program will just come to a halt.
And Chris Dodds of the Newcastle Neighbourhood Centre believes there's a political motive behind the cuts. Alison Peters, NBN News. The annual event attracts thousands of spectators and hundreds of men willing to take their chances on the streets of Pamplona. Adrenaline rises as the bulls lower their heads and charge, and in the bottleneck some of the runners fall by the wayside. And in a move to ensure the future of the sport, the Spanish government has decided to subsidise a school teaching bullfighting.
Spanish boys often play the game of bulls. And deep in the hearts of many lies the dream of glory, of facing a real bull as the crowd roars its acclaim. Now they can learn how at school, the school for bullfighters in Madrid. The government subsidizes it and charges the students less than $3 a month. Here, Professor Molinero explains what to do when a half-ton bull charges at you, and what not to do. For this school, a field trip is a day in the stands at the Madrid Bull Ring, as the students watch their dream being acted out perilously on the sands below. Instructor Piri points out what the professionals in the ring are doing right and wrong. It's certainly easier to do in school without the live bull and those deadly horns. It's important to learn how a bull behaves, how man and bull respond to each other. These are students who are determined. Their vision of glory is before their eyes as they learn how to run up to a charging bull, place the banderillas, and move safely away. These teenagers come from a cross-section of society, but for some, becoming a star bullfighter, like becoming a rock musician, seems like the fast road out of poverty. Despite the odds, this 19-year-old graduate won a chance to appear in the top ring, Madrid. He triumphed. A dream fulfilled. Robert Trout, ABC News, Madrid.
Motherhood is a daunting responsibility for most first-timers, but the single mothers at Mallison House must cope without the support of an ordinary home.
Girls who find that they don't have the family support that other people have, and that's where this place fulfills a very particular need.
The home is run by the Uniting Church's Newcastle Youth Service and can accommodate up to 6 mothers and their babies. But it provides more than just a roof over their heads. A full-time mothercraft nurse is there to give advice and support in a warm home environment.
Quite often, if you haven't experienced a lot of mothering yourself, then you find it difficult to mother.
But it costs money, around $50,000 a year. The Hunter 2000 group has raised hundreds of dollars for the centre, and the money in this cheque was raised at a recent luncheon with well-known media personality Alan Jones. Without such donations, the centre and the needy would face an uncertain future.
Well, I don't know what has happened to them, because this is quite unique in the Hunter area, a place where girls who've elected to have their baby can go through with their pregnancy.
This is the shopfront-style motor registry at Charlestown. According to the RTA, the move from this office on the Pacific Highway was necessary because of a new computer system now being installed throughout the state. In all, 9 offices in the northern region, including Maitland, Taree, Gosford, Erina and Woy Woy, were physically incapable of taking the computers, so new registries had to be sought at a cost of $30 million.
It provides instant information for RTA staff. It will also be effective in detecting any fraud and just provide instant information and therefore a more efficient service for customers.
It remains to be seen, though, whether the new office will be more efficient for Lake Macquarie residents, as vehicle inspections can no longer be carried out here. Instead, customers have to travel into Newcastle or Cardiff. After negotiations with Lake Macquarie Council, 2 parking spaces in adjacent Stewart Street have been set aside for driver testing. But even that could be seen as an inconvenience, as the street is extremely busy, and to get there the main road has to be crossed. The old RTA office, which was designed specifically for driver testing and vehicle inspection, will now be used by the department responsible for regulating heavy vehicles. Jodie McKay, NBN News.
Newcastle's government buses may have been off the road today, but not everyone knew. State Transit's bus drivers stopped work at 7 this morning to attend a meeting in Sydney and consider a government restructuring package. Before the meeting, the drivers' union slammed the package, saying it would cost 100 jobs in Newcastle and services would suffer. While the government drivers were meeting, their private counterparts stayed behind the wheel. For the first time in Newcastle, private bus lines covered some of State Transit's routes during the stoppage. But according to the drivers, business wasn't brisk. The union is annoyed that the private bus operators picked up State Transit routes for the day. Secretary Ron Pearsall says the government gave permission to private bus lines as a tactic to thwart the union's negotiations and to try and widen the dispute. Amos Mordew from Blue Ribbon Coaches, which ran some government routes today, says his company was merely providing a service.
We've had no reaction as yet from the government unions, but that we could have. From my own fellows union, the TWU, they were quite supportive. I obviously contacted them before we put the wheels in motion, and they support us in this motion, once again, for the people in the local area not to be inconvenient.
By mid-afternoon, the stop work meeting had finished with a resolution to continue negotiations with State Transit. The union is particularly unhappy with the proposal to replace full-time jobs with permanent part-time positions. The members say job security has to be considered. Newcastle buses were back on the road from 6 tonight, but the union asserts that with negotiations continuing, there will be more stoppages. Scott Bevan, NBN News.
These 3 young players are part of rugby league's future. Members of the all-conquering New South Wales schoolboys team, they recently had the pleasure of hearing their names read out in the national side.
I was hopeful. I had a few injury worries up there and I thought the form that I played up there was good enough, but The injuries, I wasn't sure. I was happy when I was picked, yeah.
They'll leave for England in November as part of a 26-player touring party. The itinerary takes in some of the game's most famous arenas, and it promises to be a trip to remember.
Yeah, we play on some of the big grounds in England, Central Park, Leeds, home ground, Hull. Playing their winter time in the snow and that, it'll be great.
All show the promise needed to make it in the top grade, but the Knights will need to move quickly to ensure they remain in the red and blue.
From 5 years down the track, where would you like to see yourself in rugby league?
In first grade for sure, but hopefully with the Knights and possible New South Wales selection and Australian selection. At the moment it's with the Knights for the next 2 years, I'd say, and then we'll see what happens from there. I'd like to stay at home, but wherever you can go, you always want to play football, so where I can get signed up with a club would be great.
Meanwhile, the Knights have relegated State of Origin forward Mike McLean to the bench for this weekend's clash with Cronulla Sutherland. David Boyd and Paul Marquette will pack into the second row, while Glenn Miller joins John Schuster in the centres. Adrian Brunker and Rod Shoesmith have been bracketed on one wing. Bruce McKenzie, NBN News.
The airfare war has all the signs of continuing, at least as long as there are 3 airlines competing for Australia's domestic market. But Hunter residents have been forced to watch with envy as cut-price air passengers travel over their heads between the nation's capitals. Member for Shortland Peter Morris says the region's commuters are at a disadvantage when it comes to the price of a ticket.
The airfare from Sydney to Newcastle is $64. The airfare from Sydney to Melbourne has been as low as $85.
He plans to approach the airlines with a call for regular cut-price stopovers at Williamtown. He believes proper marketing of the Hunters attractions will benefit the airlines in terms of extra passengers, while the potential market of 750,000 residents around Williamtown will be only too keen to take advantage of the cheaper flights to elsewhere. With each of the airlines closely watching the others, Mr Morris says there's a chance one won't be able to resist the temptation.
I think we can offer to at least one of those airlines a very, very useful market. It's a market that's going to grow. I have no doubt that sooner or later we will have one airline operating here. We want that to happen sooner rather than later.
So those survival suits are down there, aren't they?
Yep,
and they're ready for immediate use?
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
The Water Police annually review their equipment and facilities throughout the state. The inspection team gave an assurance that despite controversial cutbacks in the force, including the imminent disbanding of the Police Rescue Squad, the Water Police would be around for a while yet.
As far as I'm concerned, the Water Police do have an active future.
Yeah, very active future.
The review included boats at Tea Gardens and Nelson Bay, where improvements are underway. The Tea Gardens boat will be fitted with first aid equipment and will be upgraded for offshore operations.
We've just done an inspection of the launches attached to those stations, and I find them quite satisfactory.
Police launch Cess Abbott, which operates from Nelson Bay, is to be supported by a smaller closed cabin runabout for inshore work, particularly on the Karua River. The ageing police launch Stackpool has returned to Newcastle to replace the fiberglass hull cruiser Intrepid, now in Sydney. Although it's almost 20 years old, the slow-moving steel-hulled Stackpool is still considered by police to be the best option when it comes to offshore rescues. The Water Police are designing an ocean rescue boat to be phased in before the end of the century. In the meantime, the Stackpool has been refitted with modern navigation equipment, but the final responsibility for water safety still rests with boat owners and operators. Police and the MSB have just issued infringement books to their officers. Like traffic police, they'll now be able to issue on-the-spot tickets for offences. Fines range from $40 to $400.